Arrival in the sun. Stepping off the stagecoach, Lily was scorched by the sun's brutal glare. A gritty haze billowed, coating her worn boots. She coughed, drawing her shawl tighter against the arid air which carried the scent of parched earth and a faint, burnt caramel tang. A lean figure in a tan uniform approached. Sheriff Brody, she presumed. His face was a landscape of weathered lines, his eyes squinting against the light even under the brim of his hat. A calloused hand extended. "Lily Mae Bartlett?" "Yes, sir," she managed, her voice raspy. She met his grip, firm and pragmatic. "Jebediah got held up. Stray calf, busted fence. Asked me to collect you." Her spirits plummeted. She'd envisioned Jebediah himself, a beacon of welcome. The sheriff, however, radiated a starkness that chilled her. "I understand." He nodded towards a waiting buckboard, its wood bleached by the sun. "Let's get your trunk. Harmony Gulch ain't much and the ranch is even less." Her trunk, holding her entire world, thudded into the buckboard's bed, courtesy of the stage driver. The other passengers, a mix of hopeful prospectors and road-weary souls, offered fleeting, appraising glances before the stage lumbered onward, leaving her to the sheriff and the enveloping dust. The journey to the ranch unfolded in near silence, the buckboard's creaks and the horse's steady gait the only sounds. The land was a study in austerity. Jagged peaks punctured the horizon and tenacious shrubs eked out a living from the arid soil. Could she truly fashion a life here, nurture a home in this desolation? The prospect felt as delicate as a soap bubble. Finally, as they topped a rise, the ranch appeared. Stark. A solitary, decaying house stood sentinel in the vast expanse, its paint flaking like sunburnt skin, the porch slumping with fatigue. A barn, listing dangerously, added to the air of abandonment. A lone hawk spiraled overhead, the only other sign of habitation. Brody halted the buckboard. "Here you are, Miss Bartlett. Jebediah should be back by dark. Well's out back. Privy too. He's under the mat." He indicated a scruffy dog sprawled in the porch's shadow. "That's Buster. Mostly harmless, though he barks at strangers." Lily swallowed, masking her crushing disappointment. This barren outpost was to be her haven? "Thank you, Sheriff." He unloaded her trunk with terse efficiency. "Jebediah's a good man. A bit rough-hewn, but he's got a good heart." His tone lacked conviction. "I'll check in on you both in a few days." He remounted the buckboard. "Good luck, Miss Bartlett." Then he was gone, swallowed by the immensity of the landscape, leaving her alone with the whispering silence, the swirling grit, and the wary gaze of a ragged canine. Gathering her courage, she approached the house, Buster's eyes tracking her every move. The key, as promised, lay hidden beneath the mat. Inside, the air hung thick and stale, a musty blend of aged dust and something indefinably ancient. A single window offered a lance of light, revealing a sparsely furnished chamber, a crude table, 2 chairs, and a bed whose mattress sagged like a weary sigh. A fireplace dominated one wall. Lily's chest tightened. This was not the welcoming haven painted in her letters with Jebediah. It was a stark, desolate space that amplified her isolation. With a sigh, she opened her trunk. Her few possessions seemed pitiful against such vast desolation. Dresses carefully packed. A well-worn quilt, her grandmother's handiwork. A small photograph of her parents, their faces smiling, their world impossibly far away. As she hung her garments in a rickety wardrobe, she caught her reflection in the mottled mirror. Her face was streaked with dust, her hair a tangled mess. She looked defeated, worn down. Yet, beneath the grime, a flicker of defiance ignited. She hadn't traveled this distance to be undone by a desolate ranch and a surly dog. She would persevere. She had to. Straightening her spine, smoothing her dress, she stepped back outside. Buster remained, an unwavering sentinel. Kneeling, she tentatively extended a hand. "Hello, Buster," she murmured. "Just you and me for now, isn't it?" The dog hesitated, then tentatively licked her outstretched hand. A small, tentative smile touched Lily's lips, carrying the fragile promise of hope. The sun continued its relentless assault, but a new warmth blossomed within her, distinct from the oppressive heat. It was the burgeoning strength of resolve. She would confront this desert, this lonely ranch, this uncertain future. She would endure. The shadow of Snake Eye. The first sign wasn't the sound, but the tremor. A subtle vibration that ran through the floorboards of the ranch house, rattling the china teacups Lily had carefully arranged that morning. Before she could place the feeling, a cacophony erupted outside, gunshots, the terrified whinnies of horses, and men yelling with throats raw from desert sun and malice. Lily scrambled away from the window, heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She peeked through the gap in the curtains, her breath catching in her throat. Riders, a dozen or more, clad in dusty browns and grays, were swarming the yard. Their faces were hidden behind bandanas, but their intent was clear: chaos. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but a flicker of Jebediah's stubbornness ignited within her. She wouldn't cower. Not yet. The front door splintered inward, wood exploding into the small parlor. A man stepped through the wreckage, taller than the rest, his face half hidden by a scarred bandana. One eye, glinting like obsidian, locked onto hers. "Snake Eye Silas?" Well, he rasped, his voice a dry wind through dead leaves. The little flower Jebediah tried to hide. "Where's the gold, girl?" Lily stood her ground, though her legs trembled. "I don't know what you're talking about." Silas chuckled, a humorless sound that sent shivers down her spine. "Don't play coy with me." Old Jebediah was too greedy to die penniless. "He stashed it somewhere. And you're going to tell me where?" He gestured, and two of his men grabbed her arms, their grips like iron. The smell of sweat and dust clung to them, a suffocating reminder of their brutality. "I swear, I don't know anything about any gold," Lily insisted, her voice shaking despite her efforts. "He never told me." Silas stepped closer, his single eye boring into her. The air around him crackled with threat. "Jebediah was sweet on you, wasn't he? Thought he could buy himself a wife. Maybe he confided in you more than you think." He ran a gloved finger down her cheek, the touch sending a jolt of revulsion through her. Lily flinched away. "He treated me with respect," she spat. "Something you clearly know nothing about." The words seemed to surprise Silas. A flicker of something akin to amusement crossed his face. "Respect? Interesting. You've got spirit, I'll give you that. But spirit won't buy you your freedom. The gold will." He nodded to his men. "Search the house. Every nook and cranny. And if you find anything, bring it to me. If not—" He turned back to Lily, his gaze predatory. "We'll have to find other ways to convince our little flower to bloom." The men dragged her outside, the cool desert air a stark contrast to the stifling fear inside the house. The ranch was in shambles. Furniture overturned, dishes shattered, the air thick with the smell of gunpowder and fear. The Mangy Pup, usually a source of comfort, was nowhere to be seen. They shoved her onto a horse, her hands bound tightly behind her back. The leather reins cut into her wrists. Silas mounted his own horse, a black stallion that seemed to mirror his own dark energy. "All right, girl," he said, leaning close. "Time for a little ride. Maybe a change of scenery will jog your memory." He spurred his horse forward, and the procession of bandits followed, leaving behind a trail of destruction and a lingering sense of dread. Lily looked back at the ravaged ranch, a lump forming in her throat. Her temporary haven, now a ruin. She was being dragged away, a hostage in a game she didn't understand, with a man whose single, snake-like "I promised nothing but pain." Lucky's promise. Dust motes swirled around Lily's bare ankles as she pinned the last sheet to the line. The sun, a brutal brand on her scalp. A shriek, raw with terror, tore through the stillness. Not hers, though she felt a similar cry clawing at her own throat. Two brutes, their faces masked by crimson bandanas, dragged her toward a waiting wagon. "No," she choked out, her heels useless against the baked earth. The dry soil crumbled beneath her efforts. One assailant reeked of cheap liquor and stale sweat, the other emanated a cold, metallic tang reminiscent of a bloodied blade. Under the porch of the meager homestead, a scrawny dog, more bone than muscle, observed the scene. Usually a furtive creature melting into the shadows at any human approach, this felt different. In her brief tenure at the Bartlett farm, Lily had occasionally shared a spare bone or crust, a whispered reassurance. She represented the sum total of kindness in his world. As the kidnappers hauled Lily toward the conveyance, the pup emitted a feeble whimper, swallowed by the commotion. The wagon jolted into motion, Lily's fading cries swallowed by the growing distance. He watched them shrink against the horizon, a receding smudge of dust and heartbreak. Then something within the small animal transformed. The ingrained fear dissipated, replaced by a nascent something. Devotion? Perhaps it was merely a gut-level imperative to safeguard the source of his meager existence. He slunk from beneath the porch, a shadow peeling away from the darkness. His ribs were stark ridges under his threadbare coat, one ear permanently askew, his tail clamped tight between his legs. He looked like a puff of wind could scatter him. Yet he began to run. The wagon's trail was stark, etched into the yielding sand. The sun blazed, turning the desert floor into a shimmering kiln. The pup's pads, raw and chapped, screamed against the scorching earth. His tongue lolled, thick with parched thirst. He stumbled, recovered, pressed onward, fueled by an instinct he couldn't articulate, a frantic pulse within his frail frame. The landscape was an endless expanse of ochre and gray, bereft of shelter or liquid relief. Skinks darted across his path, vultures wheeled overhead, their silhouettes like grim omens. Ignoring them all, he kept his nose to the ground, tracking the scent of fear and pulverized earth. He discovered a discarded kerchief, ripped and stained, clinging to a vicious thorn bush. It carried Lily's scent, a whisper of lilac soap lingering on the coarse fabric. He nuzzled it, a soft moan escaping his throat. A meager solace, a fragile thread connecting him to the woman he pursued. Hours dissolved into an eternity of grit and heat. The sun began its descent, bathing the sky in shades of fire and plum. The air offered a slight reprieve, but the desert remained a harsh mistress. The pup's stride shortened, his limbs trembling with depletion. Collapse was imminent. He surmounted a small rise and spotted it, a delicate spark of fire in the distance. The bandits' encampment, a fragile hope, like a newly emerged moth, unfolded within his chest. He would not permit them to harm her. He would shield her however he could, even if it meant his own demise. He sank behind a twisted mesquite, gasping, his frame shuddering with exhaustion. He swiped at his dry muzzle, seeking non-existent moisture. He had pledged to her, in his own silent way, that he wouldn't forsake her. And lucky, for that was the name he would earn if he lived through this ordeal, always honored his promises. Even if it cost him everything. Desert ordeal. The sun beat down on Lily's back like a blacksmith's hammer. Each step was a monumental effort, her tongue thick and useless in her mouth. The water Silas had given her that morning, barely enough to wet her parched throat, had long since evaporated. The landscape blurred, shimmering heat devils dancing on the horizon. Silas rode ahead, a dark silhouette against the blinding glare. He didn't offer her shade, didn't offer her water, just the constant, grinding pressure of his presence. Once she stumbled, her ankle twisting on a loose rock. She cried out a dry, rasping sound. Silas reined in his horse, turning back to her with a sneer. "What's wrong, little flower? Can't take the heat?" Lily straightened, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Just stumbled. Maybe this life ain't for you, city girl. Maybe you should just turn around and walk back where you came from." He laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed in the vast emptiness. "Though I doubt you'd make it." He spurred his horse onward, leaving her to choke on the dust his passage kicked up. Lily pressed on, her vision swimming. She focused on putting one foot in front of the other, counting her steps to distract herself from the gnawing emptiness in her stomach. She hadn't eaten since the meager breakfast of stale bread and rancid butter. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in violent hues of orange and purple, Silas finally called a halt. He dismounted and tossed her a burlap sack. "Gather some wood," he ordered. "And don't think about running off. There's nowhere to go." Lily numbly obeyed, her fingers clumsy as she collected brittle twigs and dried brush. The desert air, though cooler, offered no respite from her exhaustion. Her skin felt tight and cracked, her lips split and bleeding. Silas built a small fire, its flickering flames casting long, distorted shadows. He pulled a strip of jerky from his saddlebag and chewed it slowly, his eyes fixed on Lily. He didn't offer her any. "You're not much of a wife," he said after a long silence. "Soft. Useless." Lily said nothing, her gaze fixed on the flames. She refused to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Later, after Silas had wrapped himself in his bedroll and fallen asleep, a soft nudge against her hand startled her. It was Lucky. He was thinner, his ribs more prominent beneath his matted fur, but his eyes held the same unwavering loyalty. He whined softly, licking her hand with his rough tongue. Lily wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his fur. His presence, however small, was a balm to her aching spirit. He was warmth in the cold desert night, a silent promise of comfort in a world that had become hostile and unforgiving. She felt a tear escape and trickle down her cheek, unnoticed in the darkness. Lucky stayed with her until the first hint of dawn painted the sky. He nudged her once more, a soft, insistent pressure, before disappearing back into the shadows. Lily watched him go, a flicker of hope igniting in her chest. She wasn't entirely alone. A whispered plan. The dust devils danced outside the cantina, mirroring the turmoil in Lucky's stomach. He pressed himself tighter against the adobe wall, the rough texture scraping against his cheek. Silas's gruff voice, usually a source of dread, was now a beacon. He was inside, holding court with his grimy posse. Lucky strained, ears burning with the effort to catch every mumbled word that escaped the saloon's swinging doors. "Jebediah's got to be bringing the gold through Widow's Pass," Silas was saying, his voice a low growl. "Narrowest part of the canyon. Can't be more than 2 wagons abreast. Perfect for a little persuasion." A chorus of gravelly agreement rumbled from within. Lucky's tail thumped once against the hard-packed earth, a hopeful rhythm against the fear. Widow's Pass. He knew it well, a sun-baked scar on the landscape, a place where shadows stretched long and secrets whispered on the wind. He heard the clink of glasses, a burst of harsh laughter. The details were crucial. How many men? What kind of weapons? When were they planning to strike? He needed to know everything. A floorboard creaked behind him. Lucky whirled, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling in his chest. It was Lily May. Her eyes, usually wide with apprehension, held a flicker of something akin to determination. She clutched a basket overflowing with laundry, the scent of lye soap and sunshine a stark contrast to the grime and menace clinging to the air. "Lucky, hush," she breathed, her voice barely audible above the creak of the cantina's doors. "What are you doing?" Lucky whined softly, nudging his nose against her hand. He wanted to tell her, to warn her, but words were beyond him. He could only offer his loyalty, his unwavering presence. Lily May seemed to understand. She knelt, her gaze following the line of Lucky's stare towards the cantina. The wind shifted, carrying a snippet of Silas's plan. Dynamite charges, blast the canyon walls, no escape. Lily May gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The laundry basket wobbled precariously. A single, sun-bleached shirt tumbled to the ground. They're going to ambush someone," she whispered, her voice trembling. Fear warred with a nascent hope in her eyes. If she knew where, if she knew when. "We have to warn them," she said, more to herself than to Lucky. He barked softly, a sound of encouragement. Warn Jebediah? It was a risky proposition, one fraught with danger. But if they could pull it off. Lily May picked up the fallen shirt, her movements deliberate now, as if she was steeling herself. "I overheard them talking about Widow's Pass. That's all I heard." She straightened her shoulders, a subtle shift in her posture that Lucky noticed immediately. The timid mail-order bride was still there, but something else had emerged, a spark of defiance, a flicker of courage. "I know the old mine shaft," she said, her voice gaining strength. "It leads to a hidden trail that overlooks the pass. It's a long shot, but—" She looked down at Lucky, her eyes pleading. Do you think you can lead me?" Lucky barked again, a sharp, affirmative sound. He knew the mine shaft, a dark, forgotten place, a rabbit warren of tunnels and dead ends. It was dangerous, treacherous, but it was their only chance. The sun dipped lower on the horizon, painting the desert in hues of orange and purple. Time was running out. Silas and his men would move soon, their ambush set, their trap sprung. Lily May took a deep breath, the scent of sage and desperation filling her lungs. "Then let's go," she said, her voice barely a whisper, but firm. A whispered plan, born in the dust and heat, a fragile hope against overwhelming odds. The race against time. The rough hemp chafed Lucky's gums. He worried at it, the tang of blood doing little to distract him from the task. He'd been bound for hours, forced to endure the bandits' drunken boasts and plans to ambush Jebediah. Each slurred word fueled the ember of hope within him. He had to get to him. The rope finally gave way. Lucky didn't celebrate with a bark. He was already fighting to stand, his limbs stiff and aching. The campfire chuckled, its light painting grotesque shadows that mimicked the sprawled forms of his captors. He moved along the camp's edge, a wraith avoiding the light, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. A single mistake, a rolling pebble, would spell doom. He reached open ground. Freedom beckoned. He sprinted. The desert air, thick with the pungent aroma of mesquite, filled his lungs. His paws hammered the parched earth, sending shocks of pain through his exhausted frame. Days had passed since his last meal, the bandits offering only scorn and brutality. He ran on fumes and fierce determination. The canyon pass. Jebediah would be waiting there. It was their agreed-upon spot. The sun was a hammer, beating down and turning the sand into a mirage. Lucky's tongue lolled, thick and swollen. He longed for cool water, to wash away the grit and the terror clinging to his throat. But there was only the endless desert, a blinding expanse. He stumbled, his legs wobbling. He forced himself onward, muscles ablaze with agony. Each breath was a shallow rasp, each step a monumental effort. The canyon pass seemed impossibly distant, a mirage that retreated with every stride. He conjured Jebediah's lined face, the genuine kindness reflected in his eyes when he'd shared his meager food. He pictured the comforting scratch behind his ears, the quiet words of reassurance. He couldn't betray that trust. He ran, but the desert was a relentless adversary. His vision swam, the ground tilting precariously. His legs were anchors dragging him down. He coughed, a dry, hacking sound that shattered the stillness. Then he saw it, the rugged silhouette of the canyon pass etched against the horizon. So near. He strained, channeling the last vestiges of his strength into a final surge. He lunged forward, his paws losing purchase on the shifting sand. He could almost taste the cool air that spilled from the canyon's mouth. And then, oblivion. He crashed, a broken figure on the scorching ground. He tried to raise his head to utter a warning, but his throat was a parched wasteland. Only a feeble whimper escaped. He scrabbled weakly at the earth, his claws scraping against the unyielding stone. Jebediah! The canyon pass stood before him, a towering, indifferent sentinel. He closed his eyes, the memory of Jebediah's face searing his mind. He had come so far. He had failed. Jebediah's return. He'd shimmered above the plains, mocking the plodding cattle drive led by Jebediah Stone. The gritty taste of alkali dust and sweat coated his tongue, a familiar, unpleasant sensation. From atop his trusty dun, Jeb scanned the horizon, his face a testament to years wrestled from this harsh land. He'd been pushing these steers for weeks, his mind preoccupied with water rights and market fluctuations, until a sharp yap pierced the air, overriding the bovine drone and the creak of leather. A small, insignificant sound it seemed, easily lost in the commotion, yet it snagged at Jeb's awareness. He hauled back on the reins, eyes sweeping the chaparral bordering the trail. Then he spotted it, a scrawny, cream-colored pup streaking toward them like a furry projectile. Jeb's brow furrowed. He didn't recognize the animal. Cowdogs were vital, and he knew everyone in his employ. This one looked half-starved and desperate. As it neared, the barks intensified, grew more urgent, stirring a feeling of unease within Jeb. This was no ordinary stray. Panting, the pup arrived, stopping in a cloud of dust. It circled Jeb's mount, snapping playfully at its hooves before dashing back the way it had come, pausing intermittently to glance back as if pleading with Jeb to follow. The realization hit Jeb hard. The coloring. That frantic energy. It was Lily's dog. The one she'd taken in. The mutt he'd seen hanging around her farm. A knot tightened in Jeb's stomach. Lily. He dismounted, ignoring the questioning looks from his men. Hold tight, he said, his voice strained. Kneeling, he extended a tentative hand. Easy, fella. What's wrong? Where's Lily at? The dog whined, briefly licking his hand before scampering off once more, its gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Jeb stood, his jaw clenched tight. Something was profoundly wrong. Lily wouldn't simply vanish. And her dog wouldn't be acting this way unless... Raiders. The thought landed like a punch. He'd heard whispers of increased bandit activity, tales of vicious gangs terrorizing isolated homesteads. Had they? He refused to complete the thought. Cole, he roared, his voice carrying across the open range. His second-in-command, a lean man with flinty eyes, spurred his horse forward. Round up the men. Rifles and ammunition. Pronto. Cole obeyed without question. He recognized that look in Jeb's eyes, the quiet, deadly resolve that heralded serious trouble for someone. Jeb climbed back into the saddle, his movements efficient and purposeful. He urged his horse forward, following the agitated pup. The cattle could wait. Whatever Lily faced, she needed him. What's up, Jeb? Cole asked, riding alongside, rifle already in hand. Jeb didn't pause. Lily's in trouble. Raiders, I figure. That's her dog. He gestured toward the retreating animal. A low rumble spread through the assembled cowboys. A tough bunch, forged by years under the sun and seasoned by hardship, they valued loyalty above all. And they respected Jeb. If he rode into danger, they rode with him. Let's move, Jeb stated, his voice a low growl. The setting sun cast long, foreboding shadows as the small posse charged across the plains, the frantic yelps of a scruffy dog their only guide. The dust roiled behind them, a silent vow of vengeance. Jebediah Stone was coming, and he was bringing a storm with him. Desert justice. The first shot cracked the desert silence like a whip. It splintered the wooden post beside Jeb's head, showering him with dust and bark. He didn't flinch, just dropped into a crouch behind his horse, Winchester already in his hands. The air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder and the frantic whinnies of terrified horses. Silas's men were everywhere, erupting from behind rocks and scrub, their faces twisted with a hungry, savage glee. Jeb's own men, caught slightly off guard, scrambled for cover, returning fire with grim determination. Bullets whizzed past, kicking up sand and snapping twigs. Lily, tied to the wagon wheel, felt a surge of adrenaline. Fear warred with a sudden, fierce resolve. She couldn't just sit here, a helpless pawn. She strained against the ropes, the rough hemp biting into her wrists. Ignoring the screams and gunfire, she focused, pulling, twisting, remembering the knot her father had taught her years ago, a knot designed to be easily undone in emergencies. It was a long shot, but desperation lent her strength. Another volley of shots ripped past, one tearing through the canvas of the wagon. Lily gritted her teeth, ignoring the sting in her wrists. Finally, with a muffled pop, the knot gave way. She scrambled to her feet, ignoring the dizziness that threatened to overwhelm her. Her eyes darted around, searching for an opportunity. Silas was barking orders, a pistol in each hand, his face flushed with excitement. He was too far to reach directly, but she spotted a stack of crates near the wagon. Grabbing a nearby shovel, she began frantically digging at the base of the stack, loosening the bottom crate. Silas, momentarily distracted by a near miss, didn't notice. With a final heave, Lily dislodged the crate. The whole stack teetered, then crashed down in a chaotic avalanche of wood and supplies, directly between. That was all the distraction Jeb needed. He'd been steadily working his way closer, using the chaos as cover. Now he emerged from behind a boulder, Winchester aimed squarely at Silas's chest. "Drop them, Silas." Jeb's voice was low and hard, cutting through the noise. Silas hesitated, his eyes flickering between Jeb and the scattered remnants of his ambush. He knew he was outgunned, outmaneuvered. But giving up wasn't in his nature. He let out a guttural snarl and brought up his pistols. Jeb didn't flinch. He fired once, the bullet clipping Silas's gun hand. The pistol clattered to the ground. Before Silas could react, Jeb moved with lightning speed. He closed the distance, kicking the remaining pistol from Silas's other hand. It spun through the air and landed harmlessly in the sand. He grabbed Silas by the front of his shirt, hauling him close. "This ends here." Silas, defeated and enraged, spat in Jeb's face. Jeb wiped it away with the back of his hand, his expression unchanged. He shoved Silas towards his men, who were already surrendering, their bravado gone. The gunfight was over. The desert was silent again, save for the ragged breathing of the survivors and the mournful cries of a hawk circling overhead. The setting sun cast long, bloody shadows across the sand, painting the scene in hues of red and orange. A new beginning. Dust devils danced across the parched earth as the wagon rattled into the ranch yard. Lily clung to the seat. The rhythmic creak of the wheels, a stark contrast to the turmoil still churning within her. Jeb reined in the horses, the muscles in his forearms bunching as he brought them to a halt. The ranch house, a low, sturdy structure built of sun-baked adobe brick, seemed to exhale a sigh of weary welcome. He jumped down, the thud of his boots on the hard-packed ground solid and reassuring. "Welcome home, Lily," he said. His voice rough but tinged with something she couldn't quite decipher. She managed a weak smile, her gaze sweeping over the scene. Chickens pecked in the dirt. A dilapidated windmill groaned in the breeze, and the air carried the scent of sage and wood smoke. It wasn't much, but it was safe. It was hers, or rather, theirs. Jeb offered her a hand and she took it, the calloused strength of his grip a comfort. As she stepped down, Lucky, who had been curled at her feet in the wagon, stretched and yawned, then trotted eagerly toward the house, tail wagging tentatively. "Looks like he's already claimed his spot," Jeb observed, a hint of amusement in his voice. Lily watched the dog, a wave of affection washing over her. "He deserves one. He was very brave." "So were you," Jeb said, his gaze meeting hers. The intensity in his eyes surprised her, a silent acknowledgement of the ordeal they had both endured. For a moment, time seemed to still. The vastness of the desert faded away, replaced by the quiet understanding that passed between them. He saw past the timid exterior she often presented, and she saw past the stoic facade he wore like armor. The moment was broken by the sound of approaching footsteps. A woman with kind eyes and a flour-dusted apron emerged from the house. "Jebediah, you're back. And you brought Lily?" Her voice was warm and welcoming. "This is Maria," Jeb said, stepping back slightly. "She helps keep things running around here." "Welcome, Lily," Maria said, her smile genuine. Come in, come in. You must be exhausted." Lily followed Maria into the house, the cool air inside a welcome relief from the desert heat. The interior was simple but clean, with whitewashed walls and a large fireplace that dominated one end of the room. A table was set with a simple meal of beans and cornbread. While Lily ate, Jeb tended to Lucky, bringing him a bowl of water and some scraps of meat. The dog lapped it up gratefully, his tail thumping against the floor. Lily watched them, a feeling of contentment settling in her heart. This was a new beginning, a chance to build a life, to find a home. Later, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Lily found Jeb on the porch, gazing out at the vast expanse of the desert. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said, stepping beside him. He nodded. "It can be unforgiving, but it's beautiful." "I was afraid," Lily admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "Out there with those men." "I know," Jeb said, his voice low. "But you didn't break. You were strong, Lily." She looked up at him, surprised by his words. "I just did what I had to do. That's what courage is," he said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the colors fade from the sky. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of night-blooming jasmine from a nearby bush. "What happens now?" Lily asked, her voice filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Jeb turned to face her, his eyes reflecting the last light of the setting sun. "Now," he said, "we build a life. Together." Lucky padded up to them, nudging Lily's hand with his wet nose. She knelt down and scratched behind his ears, the dog's soft fur a comforting presence. The desert night descended, enveloping the ranch in its quiet embrace. But tonight, the darkness didn't feel so daunting. Tonight, there was hope in the air, a sense of possibility that had been absent for so long. Lily looked at Jeb, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had found her home.